A good Yom Tif. So you'd be Tmuz auf der Welt. And it's just to sagen drushes, but I'll share with you a little bit the Rebbe's Siches you'd be Tmuz by the Rebbe Bechlal. You'd be Tmuz is, if I would say, you know, we say sometimes Rosh Hashanah is kashrus and Kines Pluchim Rosh Shlichus. I think Yud Beis Tammuz could be classified as a Rosh Hashanah for Mivtzoyim. The Mivtzoyim were born, many of the Mivtzoyim were born around Yud Beis Tammuz. We all know that the Mivtzoyim started, the Mivtza Tfilin was started the 6-day war. That was in Iyar, in Chav Zayin. We know Mivtza Teire was in Chamishas B'Shvat Tafshin Lamed Aleph. Einam developed mit Lamed Teire. But the main, start-off, kickoff of the Rebbe's Mivtzoyim was in the year Tafshin Lamed Aleph, following the winter, the summer of Tafshin Lamed Gimel, when the Rebbe was calling for rallies of children, especially Yud Beis Tammuz verbringen, and then in Elul very strongly, and nobody knew why. And then there was the Yom Kippur War, and throughout the winter it was a very difficult time in Eretz Yisrael. And that summer in Tafshin Lamed Aleph, there was the various incidences that happened. The car crash with the Rav of Chabad, Hifla Hashem Eskal Makesecha, and then there was the story in Ma'alot in Eretz Yisrael, where there was a school where children and terrorists went in and attacked, and the Rebbe started speaking strongly about mezuzah being a shmira. The Rebbe spoke that mezuzah is the Shetevas Shindal Yud Shem Edalsis Yisrael Shem Ediris Yisrael. Mezuzah is spelled in the Torah. Mezuzah is spelled choser without a vav, and it reads zod moves, and that means the in mitzvah of mezuzah is a school of yuchades for shmira, and the Rebbe said they should check the mezuzahs. And there was a similar story in also Yud Beis Tammuz, I think it was Lamed Vav, 2 years later in Tebi, that they checked the mezuzahs, and the amount of hostages, which was almost 100, was the amount of mezuzahs psulas that were found by most of the people on the plane, whoever checked. But this was a story, I think there was 17 mezuzahs psulas or whatever it was, and the Rebbe spoke strongly. Kilo nish, the pshat, divas tainen, chasu shalom, if you don't have a mezuzah, then sukum ta'inish movis. The pshat is, and the Rebbe, it's mugen look at sichas chelik yud gimel ne sofis of Yud Beis Tammuz, sichas of Bamidbar Lamedalet, Bolok Lamedalet, Kerech Lamedalet, if I'm not mistaken, the sichas over there, that mezuzah is a protection, and the Rebbe gave a mashal of a soldier that could be wearing a helmet. If he's not wearing a helmet, it doesn't mean he's going to be shot. But if it will protect him from a bullet. So the same thing is with mezuzah. Not the chasson the einish for the law of the mitzvah of mezuzah that you get an einish misa. But the word is that if you're wearing the helmet, the pshita of the mezuzah, if the bullet Rachman comes, there was a starke hiserus in the mitzvah von mezuzah. And then Rebbe basically structured Chameshus HaMivtzoyim. That was that summer. Chameshus HaMivtzoyim was, first of all, the Rebbe put them in order. Teira, Tfilin, Mezuzah, Tzedakah by Smil Sfarim. Teira is Magno, Matzla, Teira as a protection. The Shmida of Teira. Then you had Tfilin. And the Rebbe quoted weiter, the Gemara, and the Pasuk, V'ro Klamar, Tzkshem Shem Nikra, Lach of Yorim Emeka, Amr Blazer, Eilu Tfilin, Shebareish, that it's pales of Yorim Emeka on the Sheni Yisrael. And then you have Mezuzah and Stoker, Hashem says, I promise you that if you give to the Oni, if you have mercy on him, then I'll protect. Your son is going to need help, and Hashem is going to save him from death. And by Ismalish Sfarim, the content to fill Yiddish home with Sfarim and Dvarim Shebegdusha. And like the Rebbe expressed himself in Kama times, that not just the bias mole Sfarim, but the bias should be mole with the teichen of the Sfarim. That was an expression of the Rebbe Kama Pom. What happened then was a tremendous Yisraelus, and the Rebbe kept on speaking about it, week after week, whenever the Verbringens were. And wees toch, ze gewend de Sedervis is bij de Greise Haskani Chabad, gemacht Asifa, and the Achlote from the Asifa was to make another Asifa, to make another meeting, and then and nothing really budged. And that's when the Bochrim in 770, Pashat started to go. It was already, the end of Sivan, the beginning of Tammuz. Anyway, after Yud Beis Tammuz starts Merkesh Shlichus, so there isn't Seder in 770. And Bochrim started to go out to go to Manhattan and legend film mit Yidden, red mit Yidden wegen Yiddishkeit. And it started slowly becoming till they got a truck and they rented a truck and they took it. And that's how tanks started, mitzvah tanks. They ended up standing in a baker at the Erev in the heat, asking Yidden to put.
So as we were saying, the Rebbe was speaking about the mitzvah of mezuzah, and the mezuzah, the mezuzah school for Shmira, and the Rebbe had this idea of what was going on then in Ma'alot in Eretz Yisrael. Hang on a second. Okay. So the Rebbe was speaking about mitzvah mezuzah, and the Rebbe was speaking about the Chameshes HaMivtzoyim, Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzah, Tzedakah, and Bayis Malach Sfarim. And the Bachrim took out, we're going on Mivtzoyim every single day. They were taking out a truck, and the Rebbe would come in the morning, swing with his hand, and that's when the Bachrim knew that it was, that's what they should be doing. This is history, that's how the mitzvah tank became. The Bachrim, I heard this from Bachrim, now Elter Yidden, that it was Pashat very, very difficult to stand from 10 o'clock in the morning till around Shkia time in New York, in Tamuz, 8:30 at night, whatever it is, and inside the heat, and Pashat, it was disgusting, standing in the street. No one's wearing clothes, and it was for Chassidische Bacher, Pashat ekeldik. It was very, very difficult to handle it, they just had to. As from a Bacher, I remember coming home after a day like that and just plunking himself down in bed with absolutely no koyach. But the Rebbe was pushing, and it was I believe the Rebbe I heard this someone, I can't remember exactly where, but the Rebbe expressed himself possibly to one of the Maskidim that this is a tank when they eventually called it a tank kegen assimilatia or kegen isboilulus. In other words, it was against assimilation. The Rebbe saw that just like the tanks in Eretz Yisrael were fighting the physical war, so too were the tanks in the mitzvah tank fighting the spiritual war. Finally, it came Yud Beis Tammuz, and the Rebbe spoke about it openly, and that's a very historic Verbringen, a very strong Verbringen. That's ideal to listen to. The Rebbe basically, the first part of Verbringen illustrated how the Frierdiker Rebbe did the Chameshes HaMivtzoyim in prison, which is a crazy thought. In other words, the Rebbe related everything he was koching in. We know this about the Rebbe, that when the Rebbe is koching in Shlomo Zaretz and Yehudi, so everything, the Rashi, that Parsha, everything's connected. The Rebbe's koching in the Chameshes HaMivtzoyim, so it was something that the Rebbe connected to the Frierdiker Rebbe in prison. Mivtza Torah, the Rebbe described how the Frierdiker Rebbe did Mivtza Torah in prison. How did he do Mivtza Torah? Because we know that the Mamorim of Shavuos, Tofresh Pei Zayin, we know that all the Rabbeim would write the Mamorim. After they would say them, or before, whatever the case was, they would write the Ksav of the Maimer. Only by our Rebbe was it the Seder that the Rebbe would be, the Chayzrim would be Maniachit and the Rebbe would be Magiyet, if the Rebbe would be Magiyet. But by the Rabbeim was always that the Rabbeim would write the Chassidus that they said, and the Frierdiker Rebbe from after Shavuos didn't yet have a chance to write the Maimorim that he said on Shavuos. If I'm not mistaken, there's a Maimer Korav Avaya Tafresh Pei Zayin. Ik denk niet yet what was the Maschil. And the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote that Maimer on cigarette paper in the prison cell. I mean, the Meiser was Yudalat Tesvov Sivan. And as a matter of fact, there's a phenomenal Maimer talking about the Mamorim of that time. There's a Maimer dated Rosh Chodesh Tamuz Tofresh Pei Zayin, printed in Sefer Mamorim Tofresh Pei Zayin. The Dibra Maschil is Min HaMeitzar Korosi Ko. And it's an unbelievable Maimer. Pashat, unbelievable Maimer. The Maimer goes through Psukim, speaking from Tilim about how David HaMelech is being nirdaf through his oivim, and he's sitting b'chishech v'tzalmoves. All those Psukim describing what the Frierdiker Rebbe, very similar to the signin in the Reshimas HaMeiser that the Frierdiker Rebbe penned himself, of the torture and the Yisurim that he was going through in prison. And over here, he speaks in the Maimer about B'tochin. It's very, very special, you know. He schreibt his own matzav in a signin of a Maimer. Very interesting over there. Ava and Yira. Ava comes from in a state of Richuk, and Yira is from Kiruv. Very interesting thing. Anyway, that's a Maimer. After that Maimer, you've got the Maimorim of the Geula. In other words, the Maimorim of, Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, we know, was a Thursday. Tafresh Pei Zayin, the Rebbe told in the famous Sikha, it's in Lakoti Sikhas, where is it? Basically, you know, the Sikha from Tafshach Beis, if I'm not mistaken, that the Rebbe spoke about the whole story, how they came in to tell him, you know, and they said to the Rebbe to get up, and he didn't want to get up. And they said, they will beat you. And they beat the Frierdiker Rebbe once, twice, three times. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said he got a punch on his chin that hurt him for a long time afterwards. And Lulav screamed at the Frierdiker Rebbe and said, come, we want to tell you Akula, if Leichterung. You know, that was going to be his verdict. That wasn't the Einish Misa. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, you know, true to his decision, which he made the night of his arrest, as we know the story, that he was sent down a long, gloomy corridor with the guards on either side, black, and the whole scariness, and he wandered off into a side corridor which was more bright, and over there he sat down on a bench and he thought, and at that moment, you know, with all the depressing thoughts, it's unbelievable how the Frierdiker Rebbe as a Rebbe Pashat writes out his hergeshim of the oivei, what's with my family and what's with the ksovim and what's going to be, and then all of a sudden he stops himself. It's a but the way he writes it out in Das Tachten, you know, what we can take from it, how a person control his thoughts, stop depressing thoughts. What about the Eibishter, you know, Ashkocha Protis, he said Rosh Hashanah Pei Zayin in the Maimer, that he mentioned Ashkocha Protis, and that was going to save him. You know, that even a leaf, is and that's what helped him in the Meiser. So that this, and he pictured the Tzir Pnei Kodesh HaKadoshim of Abba Kadisha, and there's ... Eises HaMachshava. I mean, that piece in Rishimas HaMeiser is unbelievable. That a chassid in the most difficult situation can be Mitzayer the Rebbe and schlep himself out of his depression and fill himself with vigor, and infuse himself with the toik of ois mesiras nefesh nicht spol zu werden. That's how the Frierdiker Rebbe writes it, and that's when he made the achlota that he's not going to let them trample on him, and he's going to stay firm and strong and hold his head high. and true to that, that's the way he was firzach the whole way through. And then, so going back to the story, that they finally he went into the kancelaria, into the office, and they told him that he's going to be able to go free. That the GPU in Leningrad were forced by higher officials in Moscow to let the Frierdiker Rebbe free, but they were burning mad, and they wanted to take revenge from the Rebbe, from everything that the Rebbe was doing against the Yevsektia party, and they wanted to force the Rebbe to travel on Shabbos. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, "I'd rather stay in prison, even if it means another 2 days. Friday, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh was Thursday, and then it was Friday and Shabbos, and Gimel Tammuz was Sunday, and eventually, and the Frierdiker Rebbe davened that Shabbos Barichis, and there's many stories. They tried to take a picture of him. The Rebbe told it to Yud Beis Tammuz Tafshin Yud Aleph, the first Tafshin Yud Aleph. The Rebbe told the famous story that he came in to make a picture of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Frierdiker Rebbe sent them flying. It was in the middle of davening, and the pella is that they walked away. The prisoner was telling them what to do, the prison guards, and at the end is they walk, and the Rebbe connected it to what he spoke in the Maimer in Tafshin Yud Aleph about the difference between Berurim and Nisyonis, and the way to deal with an Nisyon is absolutely not in a spolver, and that way it's when it's the skala atzmus of the neshama yechide, then vet bottle in this battle all the like Avram Avinu in the river. As soon as you go with a Mesiras Nefesh, then it's this battle in Ganzen. And the Rebbe expressed himself as Gezen atzmus umahus mit atalas iberen kop. Davening, then they lost their whole Metzias. Anyway, then it was Sunday, the Frierdiker Rebbe went free. Went to Kastarma, and then eventually the Gula of Yud Beis Tammuz. So I'm just saying that the Maimer of Rosh Chodesh Tammuz was that Thursday. That's the Maimer Min HaMeitzer, unbelievable Maimer. And then you have the Maimorim that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave out. If I'm not mistaken, it's in Sefer Maimorim Kuntreisim of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Was given out for Yud Beis Tammuz Tov Reish Tzadik Aleph when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Riga. And that's when he gave out the Maimorim Gefen Mitzrayim Tasiya, to the two Maimorim Baruch HaGoymel, Havayli Be'oizroi, Suyidich and Kedesh, etc. The Maimorim that the Rebbe would say on Yud Beis Tammuz many times. That's Miftzah Torah. Then you had Miftzah Tefillin. When did the Frierdiker Rebbe do Miftzah Tefillin in Shpalerke? Unbelievable. The Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested. Before he went with Lulav, he said, "Are you going to let me put on the tefillin?" Yeah. And then when Lulav tried to take the bag, he said, the Frierdiker Rebbe grabbed the bag away, his suitcase, and gave it to one of the guards. And he said, "Mein Seide getragen eine Peklach." So the Frierdiker Rebbe answered him, "Your Seide, Lulav Seide, hat getragen my Seide's Peklach, the Rebbe Marash Peklach, wo mein Seide gewollt. But you want to take my Peklach where you want me to go, das beferish nicht." What did he take with him? His tefillin, the Rashi Rebbe Tam Shem Sherabe, and he took a gartel. It says over there in the Shemus HaMais everything that he took, and he action to put on tefillin is straight away when he came, and they after the interrogation and signing the whole thing. Not the interrogation, the signing into prison, he was then taken to his prison cell. And the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't waste a second. Remember, the Meiser, they barged into his house, closed at 12 o'clock at night. 3 o'clock in the morning, they took him to prison. We're talking about 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. The Frierdiker Rebbe couldn't wait to daven. There's plenty of time to say Shema Krishma and to daven. The Frierdiker Rebbe is climbing upstairs with a guard, a Ritzeach, went and took out his Rashis to put them on. It's unbelievable. Why didn't he wait? He wasn't gonna. He wanted to gleichlegen tefillin. And at the end, the guard turned around, the Rosh Merusha, and zet the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he fell down 2 flights of metal staircase, and he writes that the metal from his belt poked into his skin, and he started to bleed, and he couldn't get up, and the guard was kicking him. A schreckliche Mesiras Nefesh to legen tefillin. And then later again, he went into the kancelaria over there to the office, and they were busy writing whatever they had in their books. He turned around and it angelegt tefillin and angegeben daven Shemona Esrei. In other words, he knew that he didn't stand the chance to have his tefillin. You knew they were going to take it away from him. And he chapped it behind their back, in their face, to put on tefillin. And he davened until, what does it say over there? Baruch Aleinu. And then they were going to rip it up and smash it up. And the 50 guy had to be mafsik. And then later they took it away. And he declared a hunger strike. I mean, stel zich vor, which one of the Rebbeim didn't put on tefillin for a few days, for a day, 2, 3. Well, what was it? I mean, it's marvel to think that he didn't have his tefillin. And that all goes to show the Mesiras Nefesh for putting on tefillin. That was Mivtza tefillin. Then the Rebbe showed the connection with Mivtza mezuzah. What's Mivtza mezuzah? We know in the Chakira, when they interrogated him, so the one of the interrogator, Lulav, whoever it was, screamed at him, Duvei, you know where you are? You know where you find yourself? So the Frierdiker Rebbe answered, yeah, I find myself in a place that's potter from a mezuzah, like a toilet and a stal from Ferd, a barn. So that asked the question, why did the Frierdiker Rebbe have to tell them as a word, as a shtech? The Rebbe basically prolonged this enigma, the mitzvah mezuzah. When a person is chayev to do a mitzvah, and there's a situation that makes him potter, then the fact that he's not doing it when he's potter is because Shulchan Aruch said he's potter, and therefore do it. If someone finds himself in a toilet, then Torah is telling him that he's not supposed to have a mezuzah. Why? Because Torah says you're not supposed to have it. In other words, this year there's a Makayim mitzvah mezuzah. That was the emphasis. The Frierdiker Rebbe wanted to show how he's a Makayim mitzvah mezuzah. And how is he being Makayim? Right now, he doesn't. It's a place that is not Chayiv b'mezuzah, emphasizing his kiyum of mitzvah mezuzah. Then he said about tzedakah, mitzvah tzedakah. Mitzvah tzedakah is about the Rebbe connected it to that he Pashat gave from his food that they sent him before Shabbos. By the time Shabbos came, he already had chalas, whatever it was that they sent him from his house. And the Frierdiker Rebbe shared his food with the inmates that were with him, and also mitzvah tzedakah is with idud and words of encouragement to the inmates that were with him. And then the fifth mitzvah was mitzvah b'ayis malis farim. Very interesting. The Frierdiker Rebbe writes in the Rishimas Amaisa, the Rebbe points out that he took with him a tilim, a siddur, a tilim, and a tanya. That's what it says in the Rishimas Amaisa. Now, it's a pelagodl. The Rebbe said that he took with him also a chumash. And it doesn't say in the Rishimas Amaisa. I don't know. I found the mocker. I mean, the Rebbe said it by the Verbringen. Which is an interesting thing. That means the Frierdiker Rebbe took with him a chitas to Spalerka. Azea Spalerka zolveren or this geworden a bayis molis forim, which is, a total transformation, a different out in the mokum that. Anyway, those were those sichas, and then I'm not going to chaz the whole Verbringen. This is Yud Beis Tammuz Lamed Dalet. Towards the end of the Verbringen, the Rebbe finally touched upon the, for the first time, the concept of a mitzvah tank, and the Rebbe said, with an introduction, that when a yid sees something, he immediately connects it and associates it with a inyan Yiddishkeit. For example, if a yid sees one house, a house. So what does a yid immediately associate it with? With Hashem Echad. Echadu Elokeinu b'shmayim v'aretz. So the Rebbe said, in other words, that's the way a yid looks at things. So when we see, you go out, they're making over here a mitzvah tank. No, what's a mitzvah tank? A tank. You see, you have a tank. What's a tank? A tank is Indian, which is fights a war, yeah. And the Rebbe said, I'm going to say a word, like a joke, like a word, but I don't care if people think it's a joke, because it's Galton, and the Rebbe said this word. We know, what's the message, what's the teichin of a tank? The Rebbe said, we know that the Shisha Sidri Mishnah are referred to in Rosh Tevis as Zman Nokat. The last three is Nokat. If you spin the words around, it spells tank. Tes Nun Kuf. That means that the message and the teichin of a tank is going to be a reis gebracht in Tes Nun Kuf. Taras Nezikim Kodshim. Taras Nezikim Kodshim. And the Rebbe teaches like this. Very interesting. By the way, the only other time that I know that the Rebbe referred to a tank as Taras Nezikim Kodshim was, if I'm not mistaken, Yud Gimel Nissen Tafshin Mem Zayin. Zion. I think then there was a very strong sikha about Miptzoim. I remember the Rebbe expressed himself then as a red nicht dvarim hayetzim in alev ze nishteisik in Miptzoim. That's how, and the Rebbe spoke then again this inyan of taras zikim kochim. Why? The Rebbe said like this: what's taras? The first thing that with the key ingredient, the yesod, the reishis haved v'ikar v'shorsha of going on Miptzoim on a tank b'chlal, is taras, that the person you're coming in contact with should feel from you that you have absolutely no ulterior motive of why you're going over to him and offering him to do a mitzvah other than pashat lishmo because you want him to do a mitzvah. You don't want covet, you don't want guilt. There's nothing else that's there for you. Taras. The kavanah when you do mitzvah has to be absolutely pure. Dvarim hayetzim in alev. You want the yid to do a mitzvah because you're a yid and he's a yid and kol Yisrael areibim zeh b'zeh, and you actually care that he should do a mitzvah and have a tzavas of chibur with the Eibishter. Nothing else. There's not allowed to be any other. You know, the will step is for them, the will step is bakum, the will step is the grechan alein. It has to be taras pure. Number one, and then the zikim kochim is that they ever put into the content of surmeira and asetev nezikim, taking away from him a dover amazik, and kochim adding and being masive by him kedusha, and that's the inyan of surmeira and asetev, and that's the message, and that's the function of a tank of mefzoim. That was the Rebbe's that was the Rebbe's word on a tank, and then the Rebbe added weiter, you know, taking kaira from a tank. The Rebbe said that there's a difference in military. There's different kinds. There's three different kinds. One is foot soldiers. Then you have the other extreme is airplanes, and in the middle you have a tank. What's the mile and chesaron? So foot soldiers can krich into places that you can't get with a tank. Airplanes can fly high, and they can go from air raid. But the chesaron of a airplane is that it can get very far, but it can't carry heavy ammunition. Small planes can. Foot soldiers can krich into places, but weiter they can't carry heavy ammunition. A tank. What's also another chesaron of foot soldiers? If it comes to a charitz or a to'olah, a trench, or some form of obstacle on the ground, so foot soldiers have a hard time getting through it. A tank is built in order to be able to roll, to be able to travel on all kinds of difficult surfaces, and it carries a lot of weight. So the Rebbe brought out that this is the maila also beruchnius of a mitzvah tank. That a mitzvah tank, there is a charitz, a to'olah, a trench, a hole, a gap between the makom of kedusha and the place where the yidden are. The yidden are drei that need us in miftzayim. They're draying in the street, and we are sitting in Yichleis in 770 in Shiva and learning. And we have to be able to bridge that gap, to be able to go over that trench, the divide, the separation between the makom of kedusha and the makom of klippah, and that's the function of a tank. A tank can take bachrim straight, fresh, straight out of their learning, and take them into the street, and to be able to conquer over there. That was the Rebbe's message and idea on a tank. Anyway, so it's the Miftzoim. That was a big starke hit on the beginning of Miftzoim. I believe the Rebbe gave the Rebbe gave eventually. I think it was Chai Elul was the first time that the Rebbe recognized their work by giving out dollars to the whole Eilam at the end of the Fabrengen through Tankisten. I think it was the first time. It was a big balagan. Everyone thought the Rebbe was giving out dollars. So how's it going to work? And the Rebbe basically said, as his gratitude to the Bachrim that give that to the people that give their time to do Miftzayim, the Rebbe used them as shluchim to give out stock at the end of the Fabrengen, and that lasted throughout. Weekday Fabrengens throughout the years, the Rebbe would give out dollars through Tankisten. Obviously, there was, at the end of the summer, things had to bounce back. Benegei Seder, and hence the next few years it was starke years of Mivtzoyim. To mention, obviously, it's known the sichas of Achar Shel Pesach Lamed Vov and Chayalu Lamed Zayin, where the Rebbe kind of straightened things out that the Ikar Inyan of a Bacher is sitting and learning, but it was definitely a Hiroas Shah then that the Rebbe was due to the fire that's burning, the fire of assimilation, that the Bachrim went out and morning till evening were doing Mivtzoyim that summer. Just to mention a few of the other Mivtzoyim and their connection to Yud Beis Tammuz, the next year in Tafshan Lamed Hey, after the Yud Beis Tammuz, the Rebbe kocht sich very stark in the story of the Friedrich Rebbe's Akedah. Famous story when the Friedrich Rebbe turned 15 years old, Yud Beis Tammuz Tafresh Nun Hey, the Rebbe Rashab was in Dacha and took him to the oil. They traveled to Lubavitch Monday morning. There's a whole story. It's on my Serav. You should listen to it. The Rebbe told it a number of times. And the Rebbe Rashab said Chogro Beis Mosneo and cried and benched his son. And then he said to his son, there has to be Mesiris Nefesh. Was Mesiris Nefesh? Azeh Yonish Tanders. And that became the motto of that whole, the Rebbe was koching very stark. Azeh Yonish Tanders. The Mugdike Maimorim. Mein Ganim Beir Maim Chayim, Beir Chafaru Asorim, the Yiritzan Shamalamata, then the Makar and Shamalamayla. But there was a very strong thing in the Maimer, at the end of the Maimer. So Tesva of Tammuz was another Fabrengen, Dalad Pasha Pinchas, and the Rebbe said the Maimer Ach Begeirel Tchalakas Aret, the Rebbe went to the oil, I think, and the Rebbe spoke very strongly by and then you have the Parsha of Bnei the two causes for Yeridus Hadoros. Why is everyone so fry and lost in Yiddish generations, in the latter generations? And the Rebbe associated it to two things. Number one is, what is the Yiddish guf made out of, and what is it built, and how does it grow? And those are the two mitzvahs of Taras HaMishpacha and Kashrus HaAchila V'Shtia. The Taras HaMishpacha is what makes a Yiddish body, and Kashrus HaAchila V'Shtia is with what a body grows. And the Rebbe said that if we take care of those two, in Yonim, it will do a lot of good for Ratavin thing, and that became the the mitzvah of Neshek the Rebbe had come out with in the beginning of the year of Lamed Hey. As much Shabbos Bereishis, the Rebbe spoke to the women, and then throughout the winter, very strongly Chanukah. This Chanukah, the Rebbe was going on about Neder Shabbos Kodesh. But that Yud Beis Tammuz, Tafshan Lamed Hey, Tesvav Tammuz, the Rebbe came out with the Kashrus and Taras HaMishpacha, and the Rebbe actually said that Miskiris will fund a new set of dishes for Milchuk and Fleishik. I think 50% of any kosher kitchen that needs funds, the Rebbe was ready to pay for kashering kitchens. It's printed also on the Sichas at the back in a sophists. What is it? Chelik Yud Gimel, whatever it is in Yud Beis Tammuz, or perhaps it's in the next Krach. I don't remember now. That Sicha as well. It's a Mogadika Sicha. So really, Yud Beis Tammuz is a time of Mivtzoyim. It's a time when, from then, Bachrim go Merkshlichis, Bachrim going to camps. It's, in a camp, in every camp, you've got the Rebbe's Gimulation of the Rebbe's Mivtzoyim is Avis Yisrael Chinuch and Torah. The way Avis Yisrael and Chinuch came in is it was at the end of Tafshin Lamed Hey, Chayel or whenever it was, Chayel Lamed Vov. The Rebbe basically spoke about Lamed Vov was from the second half of the year was called Shnas HaChinuch, and then the Rebbe printed Kuntus Avis Yisrael, and the Rebbe said he's going to give it to Mashpiyim the next year. And basically the Rebbe rearranged the Seder of Miftoim, obviously Yisrael and Chinuch, they are Inyonim Klolim, that are and with the nature of obviously Yisrael, caring for the other person, and Chinuch, educating and teaching the other person. And then you have Mifta Teira, to make sure they Teira, and Tfil, and Mezuzah, and Tzedakah, Ba'ismon Svarim, and then the three for the women, Neshek, Neir Shabbos Kedesh Yom Tov, Kashrus Achila Shitia, and Taras HaMishpach. So that's basically the birthday of the Miftoim. Now in Bechlal, Benikeya, Shlichus, and this, there was a Fabrengen, a very very special Fabrengen that left a very strong impression on me, and I believe this is something that everyone could relate to. I think it was Tafshin Lamed Beis, and it was 50 years from Tafresh Pei Beis. Now the Frierdiker Rebbe, after this Talkus of the Rebbe Rashab in Tafresh Pei, was in Rostov, and he became very ill that winter. And Frierdiker Rebbe was very sick for a long time, and then he had to start working up. And it's if you read the Divrei Yemei Yomim Oheim, it was terrible how the Frierdiker Rebbe was Pasha single-handed in all in Yonim of sticking up for Yiddishkeit in Russia. I mean, the Rebbe mentioned this a few times, very deliberate, that the Gedolei HaMisnagdim, Chofetz Chaim, and the Ruchaim Ezer, the people that were able, they all chickened out and ran away. I mean, the Rebbe said this, come upon him, without a name, without the names, but they didn't stand up for it. They didn't stand up to the test, the Gedolim, and the Gedolei Yisrael at the time, and only the Frierdiker Rebbe had to fund it, and there was a lot of employing lawyers to everything is, we don't have documented because nothing was documented, but the work of the Frierdiker Rebbe was employing lawyers to fight the Evsektia, which was only a party in the government that had leeway to do stuff, but it wasn't necessarily according to the constitution, as the Rebbe spoke many times, that it's not against the Russian constitution to be able to learn Torah with children. And it was all about fighting them that the Frierdiker Rebbe had to do, and he had no money. They were closing at the beginning of the pays. They were closing shivas and shuls and chadorim and everything, and the Frierdiker Rebbe had to fund. And in order to fund, he had to meet, the joint, the American organization fund that was the representative of the joint that came to Russia was spied after, and it was everything wherever he went, and the Frierdiker Rebbe met him and got money from him. He had opposers that were misnagdim in Russia that that the money from the joint shouldn't get to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Frierdiker Rebbe had to work very hard. You all know the famous story of Tzlocha Bizman. The Rebbe told it, Chof Shvat Tavshin Lamed, about that he once walked in Leningrad to the Frierdiker Rebbe when he had to get, right before he had to get on a train that he was going to Moscow. Who was he going to meet in Moscow? The people, the Americans from the joint that were going to fund him money for his activities in Russia. And it was Sakonis Nefashis because he had someone following him his whole trip. And the Rebbe walked in and saw that the Frierdiker Rebbe was sitting b'menucha. And the Rebbe had asked, Ad Kedei Kach. The famous story, and the Frierdiker Rebbe told about the Hatzlocha Bizman and the story about the Rashba. I'm not going to go into the whole thing. If you know it, good, and if not, look it up. The Rebbe told it more than once. Chof Shvat Tavshin Lamed, and then the Rebbe told it again. I've seen it. Somewhere in Tavshin Mem. But it's the concept, and it was very, very trying times for the Frierdiker Rebbe. And there's the way the story goes in Tafresh Pei Beis. He was in Moscow, and he gathered together 9 chassidim together with himself, and together they made a krisis bris. They made a pact, a bond, that they are going to go on Mesiris Nefesh ad tipas dam achrena, till the last drop of blood. There's various girsas who they were, and a bencher, or there was Simon Jacobson from the Gruzinki. There was 9 chassidim. And that's the way the story goes. Now the Rebbe told this over. The Frierdiker Rebbe told this over in Tafshin Beis, 30 years after the story, in America, by the Fabrengen. I think it was Yud Bis Tammuz. Maybe not. It's a sikha in Tafshin Beis. In Tafshin Lamed Beis, that means 20 years from Tufshin Beis when the Frierdiker Rebbe told it, 50 years from the story, the Rebbe made a big deal out of it. And the Rebbe basically highlighted that this pact, this Krisus Bris, that the Frierdiker Rebbe made with 10 Chassidim in Russia, in Tufrish Pei Beis, is something, basically, the Rebbe like kind of adopted it to him in today's day and age, to the Rebbe and to us as shluchim, and our commitment has to be, and obviously not atipus damachreina, but as mesiras nefesh, which means mesiras and totally devoting yourself to the kavana and to spreading Yiddishkeit and to chinuch, etc., etc. And that was one sicha, and the Rebbe kind of, the next sicha, kind of highlighted that das was mod geret. Again, as mahota krisis bris is specially relevant to the youth, to the younger, the noyar. And the Rebbe spoke 3 milas that youth have. I mean, this is in various sikhs. You have the signon. The Rebbe spoke the idea of merits. We have the alacrity, the energy, the chayas when we do stuff. And then the Rebbe was discussed by Arichas the concept of non-pshora. People, when they grow older in life, and life challenges, and not everything's ideal, so you compromise. You give in. It's nicht Punkt, wie es darf zu sein. A young person has all the ambition. It doesn't make a difference. We have to do it the right way. Why? Because it's emes. And the Rebbe spoke this, both legabe the shluchim and legabe the makablim. In other words, like this. The Rebbe is highlighting the urgency for the youth was both for Bochrim, that Bochrim have this smile, mit gain business of Yiddishkeit, and also to the receivers, that we to do with the youth, to do miftsoyim on young people, because, and it was obviously the time of, there was a big hippie time at that time, you know, in America, the youth were throwing off all the oil of all previous, they weren't accepting anything on themselves. And the Rebbe had this, control the fire and make it constructive. And the Rebbe believed that instead of the American chinuch, which was take your kid to shul on Yom Kippur and you can do whatever you want before and after, and as long as you send money to Zionist Israel, you can marry a shikta. That whole Yiddishkeit, the Rebbe said the youth want to hear the emes. They want to hear Moshe Rabbeinu and Avraham Avinu and Torah and mitzvahs, and that was something that the on pshorus is what the Rebbe highlighted then, and kochtich, and I think that's something that's something that we could take. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a fabring, and I'm not just chazering sichos. To know that the Rebbe makes, just like the Frierdiker Rebbe had those 10 in single-handedly. The Rebbe said many times, a yid ein and einzig yid sich weggestellt and kegen a melucha adira of millions of people, and without being nispal, nothing will budge him. Unnegotiable Yiddish stolz. And for us today in Artis Arvocho, in America, obviously Yud Bis Tmuz over the years became, the Rebbe spoke more about, Sheva Mitzvahs and Chinuch, always about Chinuch. It's a very good ideal sikha to look up. Yud Bis Tmuz Memalef recently, they put it out, the video about the Frierdiker Rebbe and the calf in the prison. We're living in a world, a jungle, there's a lot of garbage, a lot of baloney out there, but the toikif ois, the unbreakable soul, the uncompromised Yiddishkeit, that's the message of Yud Beis Tmuz in today's day and age, and not in a way of a tipus damachreina of a fakir, to give every drop of our blood and energy to spreading Yiddishkeit and being Meisif Toiv and Oir and Kedusha Ba'olam. And the Rebbe basically, without the Rebbe, it wouldn't be a fair battle. Elam Haza has a much stronger pitch. And Taivas Elam Haza can verschleppen. And Yud Bis Tmuz gives you the boost that Teiv and Kedusha and Rebbe and Chassidus is much more strong and better and more sturmdig than any other rubbish in the world, and you got to just plug into the energy. Verbringen Yud Beis Tammuz. Yud Beis Tammuz is a time that Rebbe gewollt man soll verbringen. It's a Yom Tiv. It's really a time to tanzen, to celebrate the Niet Yekavo Krom Yevo Ad Navo, the Einid Movade, and the Nitzochen of Erev V'Cheshech that was by Yom Heim Bezman Hazeh. And it's that's what makes it a Chassidish Yom Tif, and a Yom Tif for boosting our Keach T'tan Mivtzoim. And it's a very special time. It's the Rebbe's a Yom Tif, like the Rebbe wrote. When was it? All the way at the beginning, the Rebbe wrote. It's Nes Shanasal Rabbi, etc., etc. So ein Chassidish Yom Tif can ufton, and everyone must take achlotis to be massive in chinuch, to find an area of where he can affect Yiddish children, whatever it is, or others, and to be magbir, to make the Dita Notzach, the Yemei Geula, that from Mishmach Gula Gula, from the Gula of Yud Beis Tammuz, should be the Gula Mitzvah Shleim al Dem Sheikh Tzidkeinu b'Meir v'Yameinu Mamish, and the Rebbe soll uns erreichen nehmen von Golos, und wir soll praven Yud Beis Tammuz mit Mashiachen, and the Friedrich Rebbe zusammen, and jeder eine soll erst nutzen die Yemei HaGeula, like the Rebbe begged and implored and always wrote the telegrams and the letters, Mazalton in the tag, and the Yom Masmuchim in all the Inyanim, and so Mazaltake Zecha sein, der Rebeste sagt, Chmonis haben, alle Jeden soll haben Yeshua, alle sind gesund, und soll sein a Geula Shleima v'Amitis. And thank you for listening. Soll senden Rebbe, take me on Mamish. Kol Tuv, sei gesund.